I'm very curious. What
Mhm.
did you see? Like what when you were watching that game, what did you see? And let's start talking about the next part. How do you diagnose this? And what do you do moving forward? Have expectations changed, and in what way? That kind of.
I thought you saw a team that came in possibly a little bit overrated and a team that came in possibly a little bit underrated. And you saw two potentially good teams going toe to toe. I do want to make this first and foremost about Brent Key and the job that he's done at Georgia Tech. Like a hire that we all liked, that probably had things worked out a little bit differently. Even Georgia Tech might have gone a different direction if a certain coach wouldn't have left, would have left at the time when they were trying to get him. I'm talking about Willie Fritz because that was all the speculation was out there.
Yeah.
But I think Brent Key is the perfect man for this job. I thought he had his team more prepared to play. I thought they were out hustled, out coached, out physicaled. Any way you look at it, I thought Georgia Tech just looked like the better team. Now, if we go back and we look at, you know, the 4 and 5 star ratings, Florida State is the more talented team. But so to me, I don't think DJ, because I know a lot of Florida State fans are in my mentions and they're complaining about DJ. I didn't think he was even close to the biggest problem of what we saw on the field. I mean, I thought if you would have told me after the game, here's his stat line, he's whatever, 18 for 29 for a buck 80, and didn't have the big interception, just kind of controlled if they were 5 of 12 from third down. Like I would have said, oh, okay, I like their chances. The bigger concern, far bigger concern for me, is an offensive line, which was highly touted, and an experienced offensive line, and a defensive line, which was talked about as potentially one of the best in the ACC, if not the country, getting pushed around out there repeatedly. I mean, those back-to-back drives to close out the game when it was 14-14, Georgia Tech marched down the field methodically. And then when it was 21 all, and they're able, I mean, there was 6.5 minutes left when Georgia Tech gets the ball, and you're thinking, all right, worst case, they either score or they get a field goal, but we're going to get another possession, or we'll get a stop. And like, this is when the defense finally can step up, and they couldn't get off the field. Those to me are way more concerning than DJ. Like, I thought we got what we kind of expected from DJ to start the season. Conservative, playing a little bit more close to the vest. Let's try to run the football. But while the offense is figuring things out, the defense can dominate. They're that good. They can shut this opponent down. And maybe that's why a lot of people like the under. Let's just, lower scoring game. Let's just keep controlling the line of scrimmage and you get out of Dodge. But as we saw, that didn't unfold.
I did the rewatch. My thoughts are really kind of what I had on Saturday. I thought the defensive line was really far from the biggest problem, to be honest. I thought if you're going to play too high looks, then your backers have got to trigger and get downhill fast. Like when that double shows, you got to go. And I thought David Hale had a really good stat on this. Florida State, I think, missed 8 tackles on the 20 runs that went outside of the tackles, allowing like 6.2 per carry and a bunch of first downs. I first guessed FSU's linebacker coach hire of Randy Shannon. Florida and Miami fans laughed at FSU and Norvell for making that hire. I thought it was a bad hire. The guy's a poor recruiter, and I just don't think he's done a great job with the linebacker room. I thought that was a much bigger problem, personally, than the defensive line. Offensively, I thought that they just kind of thought what they had would be enough.
Right.
Their passing game was really hot trash through most of fall camp. It was pretty good over the final week, which I thought, okay, maybe after the bye week, they'll incorporate that more. And to me, that's clearly what they did, right? I don't think they trusted what they saw from the passing game in the final days of fall camp. So they tried to just go with what was working. They just got outnumbered in the box, like a lot. Some of the late rotations and late blitzes from Georgia Tech. DJ was not you would hope a guy who's 24 can check out of it. But to Tom's point, like when you're a team that is transfer dominant, like you've not played together a whole lot. And I thought that they were very reliant on some of the helmet communication stuff. If you watched, they weren't playing a crazy slow tempo, but they rarely snapped the ball after before 15 seconds was up. So they were clearly using all of the time with the helmet comms. I mean, they were just pretty much outnumbered in the box on a lot of these runs. Also to the point where, I mean, Tech clearly did not believe that Florida State trusted its passing game, which was the correct assumption, by the way. But like Tech was doing this kind of stuff and like loading the box and doing some of these late run blitzes and bringing the safeties on like 2nd and 11. Like they were correctly guessing that Florida State would run the football there. So like Florida State trying to get back to a manageable down and distance by running the ball, maybe to get back to a 3rd and 6 or something like that, against looks that maybe you would hope normally to get, but they weren't getting those looks. That was tough, man. Honestly, like they're pretty outnumbered there. They've got to be able to check out and throw the ball, or we'll see. We'll kind of see what it can be. Like that's not going to work, obviously.
I disagree with your assessment of the defensive line.
Okay.
This stat is not perfect, but it does tell a story. I tweeted it yesterday. Yards before contact per rush, not including anything with the quarterback. So no scrambles, no sacks, although there was only 1 sack in the game, and it wasn't by Florida State. Georgia Tech averaged 3.33 yards per carry before anybody touched them. Florida State averaged half. And yes, some of that is due to Georgia Tech stacking the box, but that is going to be a problem for Florida State all year, because what they saw, teams that are coming up are like, well, why are we going to do anything else until they prove they can do it? And we saw last year with DJ, like at Oregon State, they were a very heavy run dominant team, but they took vertical shots. And DJ, I think he had his highest air yards per attempt in his career last year by a lot. Either, like you were saying, Norvell and that staff have no faith. I'm guessing since DJ was kind of doing it last year, it's more a receiver question than it is DJ. So they don't have a whole lot of faith in their ability to do that right now. Until they develop the ability to do that, I think you're going to see them struggle.
I would say if and until. I mean, we don't know that's going to come along and they're going to have a good enough passing game.
Well, that's the thing is, so
they also need to run DJ.
Instinctively,
he doesn't like to run.
Yeah, well, guess what?
He looks slimmer too. Like that, we were talking about that before the game. He looks smaller than he has in the.
You paid the guy to come in and help you win football games, okay? Like, sorry.
Do you remember us on here though? I remember going all the way back to Clemson when they were running him. I'm like, that guy does not want to run the football.
It looks slow. Everything was like slow developing,
and he looks
not an NFL guy with the way he reads defenses.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like if he doesn't want to run.
But I don't think it's not that he doesn't want to, like he's trying to protect his body. I just don't think he's a runner. Like he is not a guy who wants to run, period. He'd rather throw from the pocket.
Design run stuff at Oregon State though. Like
So the biggest glaring indictment to me on where Florida State thinks, because in the first half you're watching like, all right, they gashed him the first drive. So of course Georgia Tech would say, are we going to sit back and get gashed all day? Or are we going to start bringing some guys up and challenging them? And then they're like, wait, they're not even going to take any shots. The biggest indictment to me on where kind of Norvell thinks about the offense was before halftime. And I think I texted you guys, I'm like, this is an F in clock management. They were going slow. They weren't using their timeouts. And they were basically playing for a field goal at the end of the half, which thankfully they got. I mean, it wasn't that impressive.
It was the negative play that forced it to be like a 59-yarder.
Exactly. But they weren't going no huddle. They weren't using their timeouts. And that to me was they're not even close to being able to execute an offense. And Mike Norvell doesn't think they're ready to. So I'm with you guys. And it's going to be interesting because they got Thomas Castellanos coming to town next week. And I saw Haynes King get on the outside a lot through that game to extend plays, and he's not as fast as Castellanos. Like, they better not hang their heads too long. So while we're burying Florida State, which I'm totally okay with that. Like, they got outplayed, they got outworked, they got beat. What is the level of concern? That's where I'm trying to find out for myself, because I do think that even going back to ACC media days, they were kind of laughing about the Georgia Tech game. It was international. Like I think they took the opponent lightly. But usually if you're talented, you can flip that switch and at some point kind of wake up and you start imposing your will. They did not have that gear. All right, so let's say they come back and they're mad and Norvell's mad and everybody's angry. Are they the type of team that all of a sudden can pull it together? Are we looking at a season where, all right, DJ was brought in so the floor doesn't bottom out and the floor is about 8 wins? Like, is that what we're looking at?
I I talked on Saturday night about this, and I will talk about it again on this Saturday when all these teams are finishing their first games. I don't want to take anything too seriously about what we see in any team's first game of the season.
That's no fun.
But like, I didn't have Florida State
Go
winning
ahead,
the
say
ACC.
they're not going bowling. Go ahead, say it.
No, I didn't have Florida State not winning the ACC this season anyway. I think Clemson's going to win the league, so nothing about that has changed in my mind. It's just like, I don't know. I think if anything, my ceiling for this team changed. If I'm considering it, I think the floor is probably still pretty good, because I do think that talent-wise, compared to most of the teams that are on that schedule, they're going to be okay. And you figure out what your weaknesses are in a good coaching staff. And I do think that Mike Norvell is a good coach, and they have a good coaching staff, can fix things and, put some duct tape on some areas to get things going as the regular season rolls along. So I don't think the bottom is going to fall out on this team. It's just, I do think that getting to the playoff, if that's a goal, is probably more difficult. Because honestly, I mean, Georgia Tech fans, I'm wearing a Georgia Tech shirt, but I still don't think you're a great team. Like, I think you're a bowl team. I don't think you're going to be the kind of team that finishes 9-3 and everybody's at the end of the season like, oh, well, that loss wasn't as bad as we thought it was it? So I think that's the kind of impact that game had on me for anything as far as the Seminoles are concerned.
I agree with that. I also think it's important to remember, like, evaluating the quality of play on a down-to-down basis as opposed to just the scoreboard. Like, what is, which I think we do a pretty good job of on this show, but like, is the narrative different if Florida State falls on either of those, Georgia Tech fumbles, right? I don't know. Like, is the narrative different if what's his name doesn't slip down on that one big pass play? Like, again, this stuff happened. Like, you can't undo yesterday's newspaper, but we are probably talking about it a lot differently. For example, SMU played really poorly almost that entire game. If Nevada's kick returner does not call for a fair catch, fumble it, and then recover it at his own one, we are probably leading the show with SMU and not FSU, because that would have been the biggest upset we've had in the sport in like 3 years. I mean, they were 28.5-point favorite. So there were some things I think you can take away that are like, okay, they can build upon that. There are some things you can take away, but like, they can't really play it that way anymore. They have to show some different things, probably cut down the rotations a little bit. Like, if you're going to play a game with 50 plays, then you need to have an NFL style rotation. Okay. The idea of keeping people fresh is does not need to be top of mind because you're not playing 70 or 80 plays. Like in the NFL, you don't rotate offensive linemen, and your backup linebackers are not playing very many snaps. Like Patrick Willis is playing every freaking play, right? Those guys don't come off the field. So I think they'll cut down the rotation some. I think you need to play. You like your corners a lot. The corners played really well. You probably need to play more single high and just deal with the consequences, which I think they thought that, like we discussed on the pregame show, they would eventually win in the red zone, or get Georgia Tech behind the chains. And they did a couple times, and they got them off the field a couple times with that. But then King, on the drive that kind of changed the game, King made that great throw after they were in like 3rd and 12 or whatever it was, and that kind of changed it. But they did not win in the red zone. Like, Tech continued to execute them and really confuse, especially the backers and the safety rotations constantly. Like, they're a man short, like repeatedly. So we'll see what kind of changes they can make there.